You can find the previous classes on our website under events, and I have a category, class recordings. And of course, the Shrine and Institute shirts are available for a donation. Okay, we'll get going. For some reason, sometimes you can see that we're in February 17th. So after today, there are just 3 more classes. Next week, we'll try to look at Vatican II and the Pontificate of John Paul II. And then we're going to have 1 class on the Catholic Church in America. And finally, perhaps a little on the Church today and a summary of our work this year. I want to do the review as we've done the last couple of weeks. I'll give you some questions. Anybody who wants to answer, please answer. I'm having a kind of something unusual happen, is that I'm losing the screen of with the faces of you people. But anyway, it's okay now. So let's begin the little review. What is the name of the document attached to an encyclical that denounced specific aspects of the modern age? Was it Rerum Novarum, the Syllabus of Errors, or Pastor Aeternus?
I'll guess the Syllabus of Errors.
Yeah, right. That was attached to an encyclical written by Pius IX. Evidently, he didn't want to make all of these condemnations in official teaching, so he didn't include them in the encyclical. But it really is a little embarrassing to hear what he condemns, freedom of religion, freedom of the press, all of those ideas. But he had the wisdom, they may have been his ideas, but he had the wisdom of not to present them as necessary to be believed. At least that's the way I interpret this attachment and not putting it in the body. Okay, who made the Concordat with Italy yielding the Pontifical States? Was it Leo XIII, Pius X, or Pius XI? Mr. Valentine, what do you think? Anybody?
Pius IX.
11th.
Pius, yeah. In his case, it was Pius XI. This is 1929. It took them a while to get it together, but Pius XI, I think we saw this last week, was determined to get these problems behind him and to get on with the papacy. In a sense, he introduced us to a modern papacy, but we still had a long way to go before kind of a reconciliation between the church and the world, at least that we would could live together and help one another. We're going to see that today. Now, the third one, which pope, the fourth one, during which pontificate was the Code of Canon Law published? Was it pontificate of Pius X, Benedict XV, or Pius XI?
Benedict XV.
Benedict XV, very good. Yeah, this was 1917. Even though Pius X is sometimes given credit with initiating the process, it wasn't ready until 1917. Benedict XV was Pope. I skipped over the second question. How about it? Who had the longest papacy in history? Besides Peter, we don't know about that. I hope someday to get a good answer. But who had the longest papacy in history? Who is credited with the longest papacy in history? Huh?
Pius IX.
Pius IX. Good, Joe. Right. 32 years. And his successor, they thought would die right away. I don't know, maybe he was a sickly man, but he had the second longest papacy in history until John Paul II. John Paul II superseded in number of years as Pope Leo XIII. Okay, and then finally, what is the heresy that Pope St. Pius X wrote against? Was it socialism, Freemasonry, or modernism?
Socialism?
Modernism.
He probably wrote against
Freemason-
socialism, but this is not the one I had in mind. He was
Freemason.
Pascendi Gregis.
Modernism.
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 And this is noted a lot, huh? His kind of attack on free thinkers within the church, you can say, people who wanted to explain everything in natural categories. Didn't leave any room for the supernatural categories. And by Pius X came down hard upon them, and it created a lot of suspicion in the church for years to come. There's a story about Pope John the 23rd. He evidently, was an intelligent student, and he was sent to teach at the seminary. And I guess he had some run-ins, but when John the 23rd became Pope, Angelo Roncalli became Pope, he went to check the files of the Vatican, and sure enough, he found his name as being on this list of suspects for modernism. And he knew he was never a modernist, but it created a little bit of, we can say, a witch hunt, who was not teaching the proper doctrine, orthodoxy. Okay. Now, just a little bit of what we're going to do tonight. I try to put it in perspective, what we've been studying and what we, how we want to further our study tonight, or maybe a better word to say deepen our study. Now, for centuries, the church has commented on personal morality. It's wrong to commit adultery. It's wrong to lie, these questions, but has said very little on social morality. And I'm talking now, when I say the church, I'm talking about the popes in their letters, whether they were papal bulls. Encyclicals, I believe, is a relatively modern way to communicate. But in their communicates before, they didn't talk about poverty and how to relieve poverty. But in the 19th century, the church found itself favoring the rich and landowners more than peasants and workers. Why? Well, because these were the people who were supporting the church. Not to say they did it just for money, but these were the people who had the church's ear, because they were coming to church, and the socialists were garnering the support of the poor, especially of the workers. They had ways to relieve the kind of hard lot of workers. We're going to see this as we talk about the encyclicals that treated the problems. Pope Leo saw the situation and wrote an encyclical on the condition of the workers in 1891. This, of course, is the famous Rerum Novarum. And in doing so, he was able to win back some of the people who had left the church, but he was admired by the poor people. The poor felt that they had a champion in the Vicar of Christ. Since then, there have been encyclicals on this subject, as we sometimes call it, the social question, mostly on the 10th anniversaries of Leo's first encyclical, Rerum Novarum. We'll see how after 40 years, then after 60 years, and then after 80 years, there were these letters. And Pope and there are other key social social documents, not necessarily encyclicals, at these at these anniversaries of a multiplication of 10. Okay, and particularly important, we might say, is the pastoral constitution of the Church in the Modern World, sometimes called Gaudium et Spes, which is a document of all the bishops of the world coming together, of course, with the approval of the Pope. But this has to be the most authoritative of all documents on social concerns. So a little bit of a turnabout, but certainly a great broadening of interest in the social question and the needs of the poor. And this is what we want to look at tonight. Okay, but we still have a little business from last week to finish. I want to talk about the papacy of Pius XII. He was the Pope from 1939 to 1958. Some of us remember his papacy. I think I was in maybe second or third grade when we all had to sit still, and the voice of the Pope, Pius XII, came through the speaker system, intercom that we had in our school. So he spoke in English, kind of a slow English as much as I remember, but he was evidently capable in English. I think he's sometimes called the first Pope to have visited the United States, not as Pope. He didn't come when he was Pope, but he came previously, I think, as a cardinal and visited this country. Okay, now he was nuncio to Germany for a time, and he learned to speak German well. He also developed a great love for the German culture, but as a matter of fact, he despised the Nazis. He was a friend of Germany, but not the Nazis. This is interesting. He even supported an attempt to murder Hitler, although this evidently caused him much inner anguish. Support, I don't mean, of course, he didn't go out one night with a gun in his hand, but he had his office help this conspiracy to murder Hitler, and then I guess he had misgivings. Records, despite all that, he has been criticized, I believe unfairly, as Hitler's Pope. A Englishman wrote a book on supposedly Pius XII's treatment of the Jews during World War II, and he named the book Hitler's Pope. But he didn't like Hitler. He certainly didn't approve of any of Hitler's doings with the Jews.
Father?
Excuse me. Yes?
Father?
Yes? Yeah, is it William? Mr. Valentine?
There was a movie. No, it's Father. There was a movie that came out in the 80s with Gregory Peck called The Scarlet and the Black, and it was about a senior in Rome during World War II who helped GIs, American POW GIs, and Jewish people escape from Rome. You know, the Vatican, the Nazis had kind of drew a chalk or painted a circle around the Vatican, and he got these prisoners and Jewish people out of Rome, smuggled them out of Rome with Pope Pius XII's blessing. It's a wonderful movie, a true story. Monsignor Flaherty was his name, and he was kind of like sparring with the German leader that was assigned to Rome at the time. And anyway, it's a wonderful movie. If you ever get a chance to check it out, it's called The Scarlet and the Black, and it's a true story. And Pius XII indeed blessed the works of this Senior to get the Jewish people and the American GIs out of Rome.
That's right. Now, all this controversy started at the end of the 60s with I think it was a play called The Deputy. And the play accused Pius XII of collaborating with the Jews. And this was kind of shocking at the time because since it was 25 years almost since the end of the war, and Pius XII received many accolades on part of the Jewish people and the Israeli government. He was called a righteous Gentile for his work, precisely in what you just said, of helping Jews escape Italy that were being pursued by the fascist government, and then going to Israel. But for some reason, people think that he didn't do enough, and not only that, but they accuse him of ill-doing. Now, there's a controversy. This controversy continues, and right now there is it's heating up again. Evidently, the Vatican archives were opened during the last year, and they couldn't open completely because of COVID. But evidently, I think 6 Jesuit scholars went in there and studied all of the documents pertaining to World War II. And they, as expected, they exonerated Pius XII of any wrongdoing. And yet these Jesuits now are being accused of filtering information, only, only taking the information that seemed good to them, even though the scholars continually in doing investigations say that Pius XII did a lot for the Jews. There is a sense that he might have spoken out more forcefully. That can be said. The argument, though, is that if he spoke out more forcefully, Hitler was not likely to change his mind, but about the Jews. But he might have started persecuting Catholics even more. So that argument is, I think, well debated by saying that there wasn't a good option for him. In any way, this is the unfortunate way that he is most remembered because of his role in World War II vis-a-vis the Jews.
Father,
yes?
Was he a Jesuit?
No.
Okay, I just wondered because
Francis is the first Jesuit pope.
Okay.
No.
Carmen.
Yes.
In this anti-Catholic Bible Belt we sometimes have, people would go out of their way to make a point that Hitler was born or raised was Catholic in his early first 6 years or so. Of course, obviously he didn't remain so.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
And then I never hear any other Christians critique the other non-Catholic Christians in Germany. Bonhoeffer might have been an exception when he kind of like a Lutheran martyr.
Sure.
But they never criticized any other non-Catholic Christian leader in Germany that you could make. If you're going to blame Pope Pius, then you have to say they were silent in their complicity. And then finally, I heard from a priest at my parish once. He's not there anymore, but he said that to help save some Jews, through the Pope's blessing, the Vatican was able to issue fictitious baptismal certificates.
That's right.
for Jews, and that saved them probably more so in Germany than, say, Italy.
I'm not sure about that being done in Germany, but I have read that they did those baptismal certificates. Now, I just wonder about the morality of making a false document. I have a little difficulty with that, but I'm not that acquainted with what actually happened to say that this was trying to do good by doing evil. You cannot do good, really something good by doing something that is wrong, you know, to make phony papers. But I'm not sure about to what extent they were forged or how they were made. But I wanted to make that point, just to say, just so that we don't think that it's, yeah, you know, you could tell a lie to help a good person escape some type of punishment. No, it's wrong to tell a lie. You don't have to say anything, but it would be an intrinsic evil. Actually, that's what a lie is. Not to say this is the intrinsic evil in all cases is very grave, but it is wrong. Okay, I just to clarify that. Now, Pius XII made a lot of cardinals, and it was during his pontificate that more cardinals were non-Italians than Italians. Now, the next two popes that were elected were Italians, but at least the College of Cardinals were open to having non-Italian pope, and of course that happened with Pope John Paul II. Also, during his pontificate, the cardinals in Czechoslovakia, Hungary, and Poland resisted the communists, and this, of course, is very important. There was no collaboration with the communists on the part of people like Cardinal Mindszenty and Cardinal Stefanik, and in I think Czechoslovakia, and Winczynski in Poland. They were adamant and resisted the totalitarian government and the atheistic governments that came to rule their country. It is sometimes said that Pius XII, the growth in missions. I'll go in this order, huh? During his time, as in the previous times, missions in Asia and Africa and South America, even though most of the people were already baptized in South America, they didn't have priests. These started to expand greatly, especially with the native clergy and the native hierarchy, and he, of course, promoted it. I already mentioned the World Church, the College of Cardinals becoming the Pope's advisors, being representatives from different parts of the world were part of the College of Cardinals. Now, this question of paving the way to Vatican II is interesting because he was Pius XII was an erudite man. He studied a lot, a little, bookish, if you will, and he was not closed to innovations. The one encyclical he wrote about sacred scripture, Divini Afflante, gave a green light to scholars using the scholarly methods that were, say, perfected in Germany and would have been under suspicion by Pius XII's predecessor, not immediate predecessor, but Pius X for modernism. Now, he opened it up. And he would comment on different things, different aspects of theology. One of his great ideas was the church as the mystical body of Christ, and this was developed in different ways, helpful to in Vatican II. But in other ways, this is a little bit of the contradictory nature of this man. He could be very hard on some, say, progressive movements. In France in the 1940s and 1950s, some priests decided that they would go to work with the workers because the workers weren't coming to church. They would bring the gospel to the workplace. I mean, they would take jobs and work alongside the other workers and try to tell them about the gospel as they worked. Well, it wasn't, not all of the bishops in France were in favor of this, and Pius XII put a stop to it. Also, and this is more connected to the Vatican II, the number of the most intelligent, most insightful theologians at the time, 1930s and 1940s. People like names that I think some of you have heard: Karl Rahner, Yves Congar, de Lubac was his first name, Henri de Lubac. In the United States, we had a very prominent theologian in Vatican II, John Courtney Murray. These people, if they weren't silenced, they were refuted publicly by Pius XII. So it was an interesting kind of blend of, in some ways, paving the way, but in other ways, holding back the theology at the time. Of course, Pius XII died, John the 23rd became Pope, called the Council, and these people, you can say, were resurrected, and they became the shining stars of the Council. Okay, one of the most recognized acts of Pius XII was proclaiming the dogma of the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. This was in 1950, I think. I get this mixed up with the Immaculate Conception. One was 54, the other was 50 in the other century. But I think this was 1950 that Pius XII said infallibly in a very solemn declaration that Mary was assumed into heaven, body and soul. He didn't comment on whether she died or not. This is always a theological question. I think many Orthodox like to talk about the dormition of Mary, meaning that she just kind of fell asleep and went to heaven. The Pope didn't rule on that, but he said, yes, she, like Christ, body and soul in heaven. The only time that there has been such a formal pronouncement of a dogma to claim infallibility in the history. Now, John Paul II said 2 of his teachings were infallible, but he didn't have the same kind of solemnity that Pius XII had in declaring the Assumption of the Blessed Virgin Mary. He's sometimes criticized as being a pretentious man. Evidently, he had a very fine mind, and he would read a little bit and then give a lecture to the experts in the field about their field. They say some of the sometimes he did it in scientific areas. It was annoying to some. but he did have a not only say a intelligent mind, but also an inquiring mind, so that he would want to talk to experts on different things, and even started lecturing them on areas that were not really his competence. I mean, other kinds of learning besides theological learning. Okay, I want to go into now our main topic for tonight, which is Catholic social teaching. First, we'll give a definition of Catholic social teaching. It's a body of doctrine taken from statements by the popes and other bishops regarding poverty and wealth, the economy, social organization, and the role of the state. Now, although questions of sexual matters have social dimensions, we usually don't think of, say, abortion as part of Catholic social teaching. Not to say it's unimportant, by all means it's important. Sometimes I think that it would be good that if the statements of bishops on social matters would include things like pro-life issues. And there's sometimes a reference, but generally there's a division between pro-life questions and social justice questions. I gotta see. I think I have to admit someone into the class, and let me get that here. Oh no, everyone's in. Okay. So when we talk about social Catholic social teaching, we're talking mostly about the question of the poor. How can people have enough so that they can aspire to eternal life? That is a concern of Catholic social teaching. Now, it's rooted in Scripture. There's no lack of relation of Catholic social teaching to Scripture. First and foremost, the doctrine that the human person is created in the image of God. Then secondly, equally important, that God became human and thereby raising the dignity of the human nature, the human person. And the prophets, they continually criticize especially the kings of Israel, for not taking care of the poor. Also, Jesus, when he preached, his famous sermon when he came to Nazareth, that he came to give sight to the blind, to let the prisoners go free, and to preach the good news to the poor. So there's plenty of biblical basis. In the history of the church, the fathers would comment on the need to take care of the poor. People like Aquinas had developed a social theology. Wasn't a huge concern of Aquinas, but it's there. And then in the 19th century, the poor were starting to leave the church. There was need for the popes to speak out. And Leo XIII was the pope that did it. So let's, I'm going to proceed by giving some historical notes on these documents, and then I'm going to tell the salient themes, on the important themes of the documents. Sometimes the encyclicals are unwieldy, they cover everything. I'm going to try to give you what's most important, and then we'll give a little critique. Now, my critique is not necessarily the most studied, but it's what I've picked up in reading different articles and books. Okay, the first encyclical again is Rerum Novarum by Pope Leo XIII. It is sometimes called the condition of labor. It was obviously is about the workers at the end of the 19th century. At that time, there was a terrible exploitation of factory workers in both Europe and the United States, which led to the extreme poverty of the masses of the people. I had an experience on the border, actually the other side of the border in Ciudad Juarez, across from El Paso, working with people, with factory workers. People who were paid maybe a tenth of what factory workers were being paid in the United States. And I did hear of some abuse. I can identify a little bit with what Pope Leo XIII was feeling when he wrote this encyclical. Many, again, of the workers were alienated from the church because the church would speak in support of the nobility that were helping them, that were supporting the church, and the wealthy. The wealthy and the nobles, they had the ear of the church because they were the ones coming and visiting bishops, befriending the bishops. But the situation became desperate. The poor were no longer going to church, and they were living in misery in the cities where these factory workers, of course, lived. And Pope spoke in their defense. At the same time, another factor was socialism was gaining ground. People were becoming socialists and therefore materialists. This is one of the problems of especially communism. The people don't believe in God. They believe in the almighty dollar, if you will, but the importance of having of getting food, of getting things to use. The encyclical Rerum Novarum was influenced by a great German bishop by the name of Wilhelm von Kettler, who wrote earlier. I think he was born in 1811, died in 1877, so 14 years before Rerum Novarum. But he spoke of the need to support the poor and the responsibility of the church for working to build better structures of society, to structure the society in better ways so people don't become desperate. Now, I talked some of the salient themes. I don't have them all here. They're all in your notes, which I send you, and I'm going to tell you all of the themes that, although in this case, they are all here. Okay. First of all, humans have a right to work. They have a right to decent working conditions. They have a right to own land. This is, again, more in the sense of private property being a good thing for people. And so that everyone has a right to own private property or land. And people have a right to a living wage. We're talking to men here, have a right to a living wage to support their families. These were it's what Leo says about the rights of workers. He saw the ownership of the land as key to workers' sustenance in retirement. Kind of had this vision that if everyone could retire with a piece of, with some land, then they can grow their beans and vegetables and have something to eat. It was a bit of anachronistic. People were living in cities. They didn't have access to country land. But this is what he put forth. And we're going to see how this idea had to change as the cities became even more important. He also promoted what he called associations. The idea here was the medieval guild, where all the artisans of one type or another, they would form a guild, they would worship together, but they also would bring their concerns to the authorities together. So that was his idea. Now, before that, guilds, the Workers' Association, the unions, if you will, were looked down upon by bishops because they were suspected of being infiltrated by communists and socialists. But here, Leo XIII rises and supports, calls these labor association as long as they upheld religious values. He put a qualification on that. And he didn't think it was a good idea that, say, Catholics and Protestants would be in the same association. He wanted Catholics associations for Catholic workers. Well, a great limit, especially when it comes to the United States. And we already saw how that Americanism was criticized by the same Leo XIII, because Americans have this have a mixed society where people in the same neighborhood, certainly in the same city, there would be Catholics and Protestants and other kinds of people. His Rerum Novarum has a very trenchant, very serious and deep criticism of socialism. It did criticize the excessive wealth of capitalists. He did criticize that as well, but most of the criticism is toward socialists in what would become communism in later years. Okay, so those are important themes of the encyclical. Now, a little bit of a critique. Some critics say that he was kind of hard on the capitalists, that not all of them were greedy and oppressive as he writes. This is just a comment, and I can easily imagine that to be true. So he wasn't nuanced in the encyclical. Another criticism is that his solutions did not work so well. I mean, I already mentioned how his idea of everybody owning a piece of land so that they can grow food for their own age was impractical when laborers lived in the cities. Leo was seen, and this is in his favor, as a friend of the poor and the champion of the working person. And this is to his credit. He came out very strongly in favor of workers' association, a criticism of capitalists who oppressed workers, and so he won the admiration. His work is considered so important that it has been labeled, mostly I think by Catholic historians, but nevertheless by some very intelligent thinkers, the Magna Carta of social and economic reconstruction. The Magna Carta, of course, being kind of the English Constitution, I believe in the 12th or 13th century, giving certain rights to the people. And so this was considered as monumental as that document that has served the English for centuries. Okay, any questions about Leo the 13th and Rerum Novarum? Okay, let's go on. The Quadragesimo Anno, in the 40th year. This is an encyclical by Pius XI, 1931, which is an important date to remember. And it is sometimes called the reconstruction of the social order. He had a lot of ideas on how things should be done to resolve some of the problems that workers and owners were having. Historical notes, again, 40th anniversary. 1931, the economic depression was taking hold around the world. Things were desperate. And Pius XI, who is certainly a man of action, responded. One of the great fears, is certainly expressed in the letter, is communism. Communism, Russia was taken over by the communists. There were communists everywhere, the United States as well as Europe. So Pius XI wanted to warn the people about this threat. And if sometimes people kind of romantic think that communism is the way to go. They may quote the Acts of the Apostles where people shared everything. But people coming from communist countries, they will generally say how miserable it is trying to live with communist governments. So we'll talk about some of the salient things. Here, I have 3 here, but I'm going to give you 7. Ownership has a twofold aspect. You can have individual ownership or you can have a collective ownership, a social ownership. There is both danger in too much individualism and too much collectivism. What we have to seek, whether it's going to be a socially owned operation or an individually owned operation, is the common good. I'm going to define the common good as it was stated in the Vatican Council in the Pastoral Constitution of the Church in the Modern World. The sum total of social conditions which allow people, either as groups or as individuals, to reach their fulfillment more fully and easily. So the idea is we do some things not in our own immediate interest, but for the good of society, so that everyone can develop their potential and reach their goals. Their goals, of course, being eternal life, but in life that they would be able to live in peace with their neighbor. They would be able to do creative work. Now, Pius XI had this idea, which he called corporatism, to resolve these labor problems that were, springing up all over. He said that the workers should form their what he called syndicates with unions is what we would say, but syndicates with all the workers of one type, and then the management, the owners, he called them the leaders of industry, would form their own syndicate and come to to some agreement on what they thought was necessary in their bargaining with workers. And then these 2 syndicates, their representatives, of course, would come together and resolve the questions, whether it was wages or working conditions, or at that time, not much was said about health insurance or retirement insurance, but these eventually came to play. Now, he said, this is interesting, no strikes and no lockouts. This is basic. These are part of the rules. And he said where the two syndicates could not come to some agreement, then the government has to step in and to resolve the question. So he has a role in the government. He was not, say, a big government person. He thought that the role of the government would be constrained by the principle of subsidiarity. Do I have that here? No. Yeah, principle of subsidiarity. Now that's a big word. People generally don't know what it means. Subsidiarity would say that things should be done at the lowest level of social organization as possible. So, who should raise children? Should the state have children camps where people delivered their children? No, they should be raised in families. Who should educate children? Should there be national schools or maybe the community schools like the public schools that we have now? Of course, in the church, we would always want to make room for Catholic schools, but I just give that as an example. How about medical care? And now we can see the difficulties that are going to arise in the future. What is the best way to organize medical care? Should we have only private care, government care, local government, state government, or national government running the operation? Subsidiarity, say the lowest level where it can be effectively done. That's what social subsidiarity is. In this encyclical, he almost coins the word social justice. He uses it a number of times, and it has a meaning of where wages can support the family, where people can live with a certain amount of dignity from what they earn. This is social justice. He talked about the concentration of economic power leading to conflicts within states and among states. He criticized this concentration of power, the monopolies controlling, say, all of production of steel or all of the transportation. These create grave inequalities, and they have to be the power has to be distributed away from these concentrations. He also criticizes capitalism. Capitalists, we see this, we hear it now from Pope Francis, people who want to accumulate a lot of wealth and don't care about their neighbors. It may have been a bit of a caricature, but it's certainly untrue. We certainly see capitalists like this. But, and this is important, as strong as his criticism of capitalists was, it was much greater his criticism of socialism. He even said that if you were a Christian, you could not be a socialist. That's the extent of it. Now, I don't think John the 23rd would have said that, but Pius XI was very critical of socialists, and of course, especially of communists. They had firsthand information of the suffering that people in Russia were going through. Also, the criticism of communism because it was not afraid, or just to say that it wasn't afraid of it used violence to achieve its means, and that, of course, cannot be tolerated. Okay, so we have a little bit of a critique of this. He was one of the popes, even more than Leo XIII, define a definite role of the church in social issues. Church doesn't stand on the sidelines, but it makes these suggestions, recommendations, and helps the government put them into practice, or helps the people put them into practice, if it's the government or if it's the labor associations, or if it's the owners of industry. This is a little bit of a criticism. You know, the corporatism sounds great, but it never was practical. You know, there never were these giant syndicates of laborers and industry leaders to negotiate in one place. The negotiations were basically local within companies. There were some big labor organizations. I'm thinking of the United States now, but they were divided and had local, pretty much like subsidiarity demands at times that they negotiated with their employer individually. It wasn't this, you know, all the employers and all of the workers coming together to determine wages and working conditions. Okay, any questions about Pius XI, Quadragesimo Anno? This is a picture that was taken from the Catholic Worker. Some of you may recognize it. Fritz Eichenberg published this in the Catholic Worker. It's called Christ of the Breadlines, and Christ being among the poor.
Father, I have a question.
Please.
Is this pretty much similar to what is going on in America now? People asking for a fair wage to have a decent living for their family?
Yes, but I think something has to be said about that. At least in the way at least the way I see it. Now, you know, we're talking about raising the minimum wage, and some people think it will be good for the poor, and people talk, the ones who want to raise the minimum wage want to sometimes talk about raising it so a person can raise a family on the minimum wage. I think that in the time of Pius XI, it was a living wage for heads of family, not that say a high school kid working a second job would have enough money to raise a family. And this is what I hear people saying today, where at that time the living wage would be for that family worker, that he could support his family, presuming that the wife would be at home with the children. This is part of it then. So there is a similarity, but I find that sometimes people today are misreading the idea of living wage and minimum wage. Minimum would be so that, let's say, the high school student is not exploited by working after school, that he would have, well, there's $5, $10, or now $15. Please, what were we going to say?
I wonder, what about Obamacare? A lot of people are against that. Wouldn't that give everybody an equal chance to have a decent doctor, or have the same type of health care as your average middle class family or your upper middle class family? Like
yes, I agree. I want to say just a couple of things about Obamacare. I'm not sure of why some of the, I'm sure there's some very intelligent criticism of this system, but it certainly seems to have allowed poor people insurance, that they can go to the doctor or go to a hospital and not worry about paying a debt for the rest of their lives or leaving a debt when they die. I think it's very important. Unfortunately, the church was not able to back Obamacare because it included the funding of abortions. And so it never met it never received the full support of the church. The Catholic Health Organization, Catholic Health Association, they did support it, but the bishops didn't. I think they were a little bit embarrassed by their non-support because they saw Obamacare as giving the poor people the help that they needed. And yet they didn't want to support something that was compromised by abortion. Now, people will, this is not a perfect world. They'll say we live in a world of compromise, but again, they didn't want, they thought it would be wrong to, what's the word, to give this type of cooperation for that.
Father, a question here. I hear you speak about the critiques of capitalism, socialism, communism. Is there a model nation-state structure that the church endorses? I mean, every system's got its warts,
right.
But is there a model system that the church endorses?
I don't think so. Now, the problem is one of the problems is any system, and then you have some bad people coming in and milking the system for what they can get, and so it's no longer seems that good. I don't think in any of the social documents, though, do the popes point to the perfect society, and as far as model. Now, John Paul II, he was the genius. I mean, he was a very, very intelligent man, a philosopher, a theologian. I mean, a university caliber, and also had this vast experience, not only as living in a communist country, but working. He did a lot of manual work during the war, Second World War, before he entered the seminary. So he had vast experience, vast knowledge, great mind, and all of that. He would, and we're going to get to this, I hope tonight. Anyway, we'll get to it. His in Centesimus Annus, he congratulates the capitalist system and talks about the value of capitalism. And if you profits do show success in business, in know-how, but he still would criticize some aspects, say, of the government of the United States, and especially when it seems the systems seems to promote a lot of consumerism. He didn't have much use for that, and to some extent, these are individual choices, to consume a lot. But to some extent, the governments do promote it for whatever reason, maybe to increase production and thereby increasing wealth. Okay, let's get on. We certainly want to get up to at least John Paul II today, and I see we only have 25 minutes left, so I'm going to try to move with a little bit more speed. Now, the next pope, significant pope, we jump over Pius XII. He, as I said, talked about everything, and he had his ideas on the society, business and society as well, but he never wrote an encyclical. So we're just going to let him go right into Mater and Magistra, the first social encyclical, 1961. Again, this multiple of 10 from Leo's encyclical, and then a few years later, Parchamenteris, 1963. Some, these sick laws, a lot of people call them by their Latin names, and we just got to get used to that. Sometimes they're called by their English names that make more sense, but we're not familiar with it. These are part of the problems. So Mater and Magistra, which means mother and teacher, is sometimes called Christianity and Social Progress. And Peace on Earth, well, Parchamenteris is maybe called Peace on Earth, or some people like to think of it as the Pope's farewell address to the world, and I'll tell you why in a minute. A few historical notes. This was the post-war era when business was booming, especially in Europe and in North America. Asia started, Japan became an economic miracle, and that. It was also the end of colonization in Africa and Asia. The Belgians were pulling out of the Congo. The English were pulling out of Nigeria, and so forth. Farming became big business. You no longer were able to, it started around this time, no longer able to support a family with just a farm. Farming, if people are going to work full-time on the farm, they had to either have great big lands or work for a great big landowner. Women started participating in public life. Around this time, women went to work during the war to some extent, but after the war, some became kind of frustrated being at home all the time, and they wanted to join the workforce. So it was considered acceptable for women to go and work, even if they had children. And then there were a couple of it's a historic events, political events. One was the Berlin Wall in 1961, partitioning the free, or say the capitalist Germany from communist Germany. And then 1963, the Great Missile Crisis, in which we really were afraid that millions of people might die. Those were events that kind of shaped the formulation of these documents. Some salient themes. Again, I have many more than the three I put there. Church is not only a teacher of morals, according to John the 23rd, but a mother of the oppressed. Mater, Magistra, Mater and Magistra. He talked about a balance between the public sphere and the private sphere. This was a kind of hope he had in some socialized activities. Governments taking over, say, the steel industry in some countries. He thought that it would work better than in reality it usually does. But anyway, he was open to socialization, seeing it necessary if there was progress is going to continue. Remember, I said subsidiarity, do things at this at the lowest level of organization possible. Well, it seemed that now more and more you needed greater levels of organization. People were no longer finishing school at the neighborhood elementary school. They were finishing school at the university, which needs a lot more resources and government assistance. So John the 23rd noticed these things, and he promoted it. He said that there was increasing interdependence of people, which calls for more socialization of resources. We already mentioned the Obamacare. We might have, we might say, like tremendous boon to elderly medical care, Medicare, and of course Medicaid as well, so that the elderly could would not spend all of their savings on health care. But it required government sources, the pool of resources of taxes. He had more latitude toward the state in business and other social initiatives to promote the common good. So he started thinking favorably of, not to say socialism as a iron rule, but some socialist activities. Hey, we can see that easily. You know, insurance is a social activity. Now almost everyone has some kind of insurance. Say 200 years ago, people didn't have insurance because their needs were going to be met where they were. They didn't have these great needs of costly medical care in old age or long retirements. Okay, and then he called for the government to support oppressed farmers. He himself was a son of a peasant family, and he saw the need to help the poor farmers. Rich countries should help the poor countries without creating another kind of dependency, another kind of colonialism. Okay, so that's Mater and Magistra. And then 2 years later, as he was dying, this was like a month before he died, he published the encyclical Pacem in Terris, Peace on Earth. And they sometimes called his farewell statement to the world, this document. And it's a wonderful document listing human rights and talking about, again, the need for the rich to live in solidarity with the poor, to come to their aid. And then it includes a plea to end the arms race. I suppose that's one reason why it's called Pacem in Terris. Obviously, the name comes from the gospel, but peace on earth, goodwill to men. But he did talk about peace, the need to end the arms race, to ban nuclear weapons, and to practice interdependence. We help one another. The critique of the documents, Mater Magistra was famously critiqued by a very famous liberal Catholic, William Buckley. He said, Mater si, Magistra no. The church is the mother of everyone, and of all her faithful. But it is, according to Buckley, is the ideas of the socialist tendencies of the document were not practical, and so the church shouldn't try to teach. What I'm saying here is that there was a criticism from conservatives to the document. And there was also a criticism of Pacem in Terris. Everyone said, "Oh, this is a wonderful document," but kind of conflicting interests would say something good about part of the document. So capitalist countries would say yes, they talk about freedom of press, freedom of religion. This is right. Where communist countries would focus on these material rights that he claimed, the right to food. And also, evidently, the communists liked his ideas on disarmament because they were struggling to keep up with the rich countries and the West in producing arms. Okay, so any questions about John 23rd and his encyclicals? Well, let's get on with Gaudium et Spes. That, of course, means hope and, joy and hopes. First words of the document where the church celebrates the joys and the hopes, the Gaudium et Spes. Oh, I forget the other things it says, but another pair of words it uses. This is, of course, the pastoral constitution of the church in the modern world, one of the 4 primary documents of Vatican II. It treats of family, in personal dignity, the role of the states, armaments. It's a huge document. Pope St. John Paul II is credited with working very hard on this document. It wasn't written by him, but he did have a lot to say on it, and he championed it. His papacy can be seen as bringing to bringing to light what the document says in his own writings. Historical notes. When I say see above, I mean that if it's the same thing with the same historical notes as John the 23rd, because John the 23rd started the council and it finished just 2 years after his death, 2.5 years after his death in 1965. It was addressed like Pacem in Terris, not just to the bishops of the church, or not just only to Catholics, but to all humanity. The church was making a declaration to the world. Its openness is what the Gaudium et Spes means. The joy and the hopes of the world are the joys and the hopes of the Catholic Church. Now, we remember that in the 19th century, the church started to turn in on itself. It was being criticized right and left by the governments of the world. And here it kind of now turns out again, especially with this document, but the whole of the Vatican Council, trying to create a dialogue with the world to produce a better world. It no longer would see itself as having all the answers, but giving moral guidelines and then in a dialogue, well, what can we do that's right and helpful? Okay, so that's the reconciliation with the world. This is the first time, this is significant, the first time where an ecumenical council, all the bishops of the world, would expressly address social, cultural, and political questions. And it indicates, and it does this in such a benign way. There is no harsh criticism in this document, except there is one. It isn't abortion. Well, what it condemns, it uses that term, is the targeting of population centers, especially the idea of nuclear bombing of population centers. But anyway, it does condemn that. Now, it speaks against abortion, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't speak in the terms of, let all people who have abortions be condemned, be anathematized. Okay, so now we'll get to some of the salient themes. The church has a role in the world. It's not an authority. It shouldn't dictate political or economic structures, but it shares the joys and the hopes of all humankind. It is there to enhance human dignity and advance the common good with its recommendations, especially moral recommendations. It grounds the church's concern for human dignity in theology. The theology of the council is rich. Again, it had some of the best theologians, it had the best Catholic theologians in the world there to write it. One of them being St. John Paul II, but others like Karl Rahner and Yves Congar, John Courtney Murray. These people had Henri de Lubac. They had a real hand in the documents. And so the theology is rich, consistent. It starts, this is interesting, just a little bit of the process. It starts with the signs of the times. This was an idea of John the 23rd. Let's look at the signs of that. What are people doing? What are their actions telling us? And start from there, rather than start from kind of the ideal way and then deduce what should be done. We should look at people are doing and learn from that and then propose ways to resolve the problems that are there and not just theoretical problems. And it was positive. It's kind of it's kind of faultless sometimes because of its optimism. I want to give you an example of that. But humanity can construct political and social orders to serve human dignity. Of course, it's being done probably to some extent all over, but we haven't have the perfect solution yet. And then it talks about the worker, these questions that Leo the 13th examined. Human labor is superior to other components of the economy. You know, sometimes in economics, we think of the three necessities for production, capital, land, and labor. Here, the church says, labor is more important than capital and land. All have a right to goods sufficient for oneself and one's family. And this is a basic tenet. All public authorities should curb private property when it hurts the common good. Now we're going to see Pope St. Paul VI carry that out in very significant ways, but it's here in this document as well. Public authorities should curb private property when it doesn't serve so that everyone can develop their potential. I already said no condemnations except that of targeting civilian populations. A critique. A positive outlook on the world and call to work together with peoples of other religious traditions and non-believers. This has been heralded, been praised by Catholics, Protestants, people of all religions. They really saw something good happening in the church here. It's positive outlook and it's called to work together. There's no triumphalism in the document. It doesn't say, that the church has always done this very well. It tries to define a role for the church, but in a rather modest way. No saying the church is always right and, Protestants or the kings, they're often wrong. No, it is modest. There is a critique, I would say, that is it is a little bit too optimistic, and I want to give you an example of why it can be said that it's too optimistic. At one point, the document says how humanity has conquered outer space. And what did it mean? This 1965, at this time, Russia, the United States had sent astronauts out of the human atmosphere and into outer space. But that's what, but to say that you conquer outer space when all you do is, you know, by a few miles leave the Earth's atmosphere, it is a bit of a stretch, huh? A big stretch. Outer space is huge. I mean, you know, we can't even see the ends of outer space, and yet it says that the document claims that the humanity has conquered outer space, not even getting out of our solar system yet. And I don't know if, from what I read, we're not likely to, humans are not likely to get to Mars for a long time, and that's only the closest planet. Okay, let me do Paul VI, and then we'll call it a night and try to catch up next time. He wrote a very important encyclical regarding human development in third world countries. It calls Populorum Progressio, the progress of the peoples. Sometimes it's called the development of the peoples. A few historical notes. First encyclical treating only the economic and social development of poor countries. He kind of focuses on the poor. This is in 1967, so not one of those years of you know, multiple of 10 of the first encyclical. But anyway, certainly treating it necessary. Catholic, excuse me, not Catholic, but capitalist countries were showing consumer, as we said sometimes, what's the word, consumerist consumption, where, you know, just to show, not you want to get enjoyment, just to show off, you use all these things. Conspicuous consumption, that's the word I want. A buildup of arms. The Cold War was in its highest point, huh? And United States, Soviet Union spending billions of dollars, and yet hunger, suffering in the what we say the third world, neither first world capitalism, second world socialism, but third world poverty. Salient themes: challenges basic principles of capitalism, such as accepting profit as key motive for progress. And we're going to, if you're a profitable country, then you're a good company. You're a show of progress. Competition is the supreme law of economics. Private property without limit or responsibility. These are the ideas that the Pope critiques in this encyclical. Call for public programs to relieve poverty. Individual initiatives and free competition are not enough. The governments have to give money to the poor so that they can raise crops to feed their families, things like that. Social initiatives. Unfortunately, they have a cost, but often they do help. You can say that too. Economic development is to serve all humanity, not just the rich countries. So yes, if these Western countries are developing, their development shouldn't, their progress should just not go to their own, but they should assist other countries. We are, you know, solidarity with other people. And this was this following point was one that was much noted. He said, unused property may be expropriated when there is great need. Now, I'm not sure in the United States, but I know in third world countries, I was in Honduras, and one of the big questions there when I was there, this is 25 years, almost 30 years ago, but And the land was just fallow. Nothing was being done with it. The poor were looking for land to cultivate. Couldn't they take some of that land? Well, Paul VI would say the government should take that land that wasn't being used by the rich and help the poor with it. All human rights are to serve the principle of the universal destiny of created goods. This is a right that was elaborated by Thomas Aquinas, that God gives us goods for the whole people. Private people administer the goods so that they might be administered efficiently, productively, effectively. But still, the idea of of created goods are for all the people. And then he said in this encyclical some very strong terms. He said the world is sick. What he meant was there was a lack of concern for others, especially the poor. Now, I want to give a little bit of a critique. Instead of ineffectual moralizing about what might be done, this encyclical made bold proposals like expropriation of unused land, an end to export maximizing policies. What that is, he said that the poor countries, they shouldn't just produce crops to be sold, but they should produce food to feed their own people. That ignored the needs of the poor to the advantage of the rich. And he also, I'm saying this is a critique, this is a positive critique. These are good things, I said. And a more generous economic aid to assist small farmers and small business. These are good ideas that he mentioned. Not to say that they were original with him, but that Paul VI would promote them. Okay, I kept you 5 minutes longer. Are there any questions before we go? Okay, well, thank you. I hope you all have a good Lent. We'll be, finishing our classes, and then I hope to do that two-part series on the Passion of Jesus in the Gospel of Mark. So you can, if you're interested in that, I hope that will help people on their Lenten pilgrimage to know, to come to know Christ more. Okay, we'll end by saying together the Hail Mary. Hail Mary, full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou among women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners now and at the hour of our death. Amen. May God bless you, and we'll see you next week.
Good night.
Thank you, Father.
Bye now.
Good night.
Good night. Thank you.
Thank you, Father.
To ask you another question.